Let's solve this question. So in this question it's been asked that sulfur burns in oxygen to give sulfur dioxide. Okay, and if 16 gram of sulfur burns in x cc of oxygen, then calculate the amount of potassium nitrate which must be heated to produce x cc of oxygen. Okay, so let's try to understand what is in this question. Okay, so first question says that sulfur burns in oxygen to give sulfur dioxide. Okay, the chemical equation is given that sulfur reacts with oxygen to give sulfur dioxide, which is SO2. Okay, now in the second part they are saying that if 16 gram of sulfur burns in x cc of oxygen. Okay, so they are saying that we having 16 gram of oxygen, and this 16 gram of oxygen burns in x cc of oxygen. Okay, so that means the volume of the oxygen is given, which is xcc. Okay, we don't know, we have to calculate that xcc. Now in this third part they are saying that calculate amount of potassium nitrate. Okay, calculate the amount of potassium nitrate. Potassium nitrate is KNO3, which must be heated to produce xcc of oxygen. Okay, so let's understand this question properly. So second chemical equation which they have given is that KNO3, okay, potassium nitrate is heated. Okay, they are saying that calculate the amount of potassium nitrate. We have to calculate the amount. Okay, amount of potassium nitrate which must be heated to produce x cc of oxygen. So whenever the potassium nitrate gets heated, it forms a potassium nitrite KNO2 plus O2, oxygen. Okay, so let's balance the chemical equation. Perfect. How the chemical reaction is balanced. Now this xcc, and this xcc should be same. Okay, volume xcc. So what they are asking, basically they are asking us to calculate the amount of potassium nitrate which must form the xcc of oxygen. So how do we tackle this type of question? So first we calculate the amount of oxygen required in order to burn the 16 gram of sulfur. Okay, once we know the amount of oxygen, what do? We calculate the amount of potassium nitrate which will produce the exact amount of oxygen. Okay, so let's solve this question. So if this question comes, sulfur plus oxygen is equal to O2. Okay, sulfur plus oxygen gives SO2. Okay, so how many grams of sulfur is there? So sir, sulfur atomic number is 32. Oxygen 16 into 2 is nothing but 32. Okay, so 32 gram of sulfur requires 32 gram of oxygen. Okay, so if 32 gram of sulfur requires 32 gram of oxygen, then 16 gram of sulfur will require x gram of oxygen. Am I right? X gram of oxygen. Then what do? X is equals to 32 into 16 divided by 32, which is nothing but 16 gram. Okay, so 16 gram of oxygen is required. Okay, 16 gram of oxygen is required. Now if we go for this question, so here we require the 16 gram of oxygen as well. Okay, so here we require the 16 gram of oxygen. So if 2 KNO3 is giving us 2 KNO2 plus O2, so basically 2 KNO3 is giving us 32 gram of oxygen, right? 16 into 2 is nothing but 32. So let's calculate the molecular weight of KNO3 as well. So it's gonna be twice of potassium is 39, nitrogen is 14, and 3 times oxygen, that is nothing but the 16. Okay, so let's multiply it with 2, and when you solve this part you get the answer is equal to 202 gram. Okay, so basically sir, 202 gram of KNO3 is giving us 32 gram of oxygen. Therefore x gram of KNO3 will give us 16 gram of oxygen. Am I right? X gram of KNO3 will give us 16 gram of oxygen. Therefore x is equals to 202 into 16 divided by 32. So 16 2s are 32, and we divide over this, you get 101. So answer is equal to 101 gram. Okay, so amount of potassium nitrate required is 101 gram. 101 gram. Okay, so let's see this question once again. So it was asked that sulfur burns in oxygen to give sulfur dioxide, which was this reaction, and they said if 16 gram of sulfur burns in x cc of oxygen, calculate the amount of potassium nitrate. Okay, so what do we do in this type of question? First we calculate the amount of oxygen required. Okay, by unitary method, same, that is 32 gram of sulfur requires 32 gram of oxygen, then 16 gram of oxygen would require x gram of oxygen. Okay, then we calculate the amount of oxygen required in order to burn the 16 gram of sulfur. Okay, then we wrote down the chemical equation of the thermal decomposition of the potassium nitrate, and we found from here that 202 gram of potassium nitrate gives 32 gram of oxygen. Okay, so if 202 gram of KNO3 is giving 32 gram of oxygen, then x gram of KNO3 will give us a 16 gram of oxygen. Okay, and by using the unitary method we found the answer is equal to 101 gram. So answer is very simple, hence the 101 gram of potassium nitrate would be required to produce 16 gram of oxygen. Okay, now you can calculate this in the volume as well, but it's very easy to go with the gram, so we just went for the gram. Okay, so but if you still have any doubt regarding this question, you can comment your doubt in the comment section, and we'll solve your doubt by making a dedicated video towards your doubt. Yeah.